That went from 4 to 0. I don't know.
Not for me. I think you probably still have some kind of luck.
I should have rebooted the computer.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome to In Front of Ira, a podcast about romcoms.
In which we are historians, friends, and lovers of romantic comedies. Yep. Torsten.
And Sabrina. And today we're talking about Never Been Kissed, which is one of those, the last sort of wave of the teen movies of the 90s, where every good teen movie of the 90s and some of the bad ones all came out in 1999. And then after, nobody made any more teen movies for like a decade. That's not true because Mean Girls happened, but like largely the genre, like
there was a wave, and the
wave crested. So this stars Drew Barrymore. She also produced it with her own production company, it's directed by Roger Gosnell, who the only thing I really know he did is the Scooby-Doo movies,
same.
A few years later with like Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr., which of course also means he sort of worked with a lot of the like teen genre stars.
I looked him up, and most of his career was as an editor. He was the editor on Pretty Woman, Home Alone,
yeah.
So like that's his game. And so like the one thing I will say for this movie is it is not too long.
Yeah, and you seem to not like it as much, but you also probably didn't watch it a million times when you were 14 years old. So
technically, I would have been 19 years old. So
yeah, and so you're probably already sort of almost too old for this in a way. The writers are Mark Silverstein and Abby Cohn.
Yeah.
And they tend to write things together. They did they did a few other sort of mediocre rom-coms.
I think that's fair, yeah.
That I watched and that were completely fine, but also no intention to see again. So apparently they had the story pitch for Valentine's Day, but they didn't write the screenplay. They wrote How to Be Single, which is one of those that I've seen like a couple times, and that was fine, but I also don't like Dakota Johnson all that much. And then one with Channing Tatum, The Vow, and Rachel McAdams. So yeah. So they're kind of in this genre, but like they're not.
Yeah. He's Just Not That Into You is also one of their.
Right, yeah.
Which yeah.
Yeah. Which is another one of those that like is sort of one of the like we could do that at some point. It's loosely based on that self-help book, which is interesting given, Nora Ephron once again, but it's it is also one of those fine ones, I guess.
It's Ken Kwok is directed, so like it elevates it a little bit above that, but it's basically just like you wouldn't be annoyed that you saw this on a Saturday night, but you would forget it.
Yeah, or like on an airplane or something. Like it's kind of serving that purpose. So what really struck me watching this now is how much it's trying to be 10 Things I Hate About You, even though
so much.
But like, I need to look this up again because didn't they come out almost at the same time?
Kind of, yeah. I think what I noticed is
like also 1999.
They're very. I think this is just like a way of movie making that is sometimes successful when it's 10 Things I Hate About You, and it's sometimes kind of mediocre. Which I would call this film mediocre. I don't have hate for it. I don't have love for it. I see some problems with it that we're going to talk about, but yeah, it is kind of it's perfectly watchable as a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that there's this moment clearly because I mean, Once Upon a Time wrote my MA thesis about teen movies, and there is this wave, this trend of doing literature adaptations of teen movies. We discussed some of these things. Clueless kind of kicks that off, but then in 1999 you have a few of those, which speaks to the fact that probably studios were actively soliciting these from writers, which is why in 1999 you have 10 Things I Hate About You. Never Been Kissed isn't really one, but also there is a lot of allusion to As You Like It.
Yeah.
And sort of that thing of like being in disguise and falling in love with someone in disguise. So it is at least, I think, a loose thing. Like it's a very, very loose adaptation, or not really adaptation, but at least plays with Shakespearean tropes in that way. And then obviously Cruel Intentions is one that also comes out in 1999, which is not a rom-com, but it's a teen movie. So it's sort of very much that zeitgeist, right? So that's what we could definitely say about it.
Yeah. It's the thing that struck me about it that I did not remember at all. And to be fair, I probably watched this the last time 20 years ago. I'm gonna venture. Yeah. Is how the soundtrack feels like all the songs that didn't make it on the Things I Hate About You soundtrack disc. Like it is in that vibe, but like it's just like the Cardigans' Erase and Rewind is like the song that really hits for me, and all the other ones like, oh yeah, it's like the temporary song you put in 10 Things I Hate About You before you knew that you could clear, Letters to Cleo. So yeah, there's just so much overlap. So A, the Shakespeare thing, B, the soundtrack, C, sort of the pace and some of the, I don't know, like the vibe of it, I guess. It's just, there's a lot of that happening. And also what they also have in common is that this also has an incredibly stacked supporting cast of people who would become famous after, just like 10 Things I Hate About You did. So there's like bit parts. This is James Franco's first movie role. And I mean, like, this aged badly because he's a rapist. But like, I mean, he clearly became someone after. I mean, to be fair, he was in... what is it? What am I trying to say? The teen show Judd Apatow did that everyone was in. Jason Segel and Seth Rogen and James Franco and Linda Cardellini. But like Freaks and Geeks.
But and then Jessica
Alba. I didn't know he was a rapist. I'm just gonna put that somewhere in research. Because
this is why Seth
I just
Rogen
know that I don't like him. That's just
why you don't like him.
I thought it was vibes based, but maybe my vibes tracker was reacting.
This is a while ago. This is also why it's Seth Rogen, to my knowledge, being one of the only people in the public eye who actually broke ties with someone they were close friends with when they found this out, which like put Seth Rogen big in my books. Because...
So the thing that I wrote down when it comes to some of this cast, like there's this scene or several scenes in like the hallways when you meet all these people. The Mean Girls look right out of Mean Girls. Didn't expect Jessica Alba there. James Franco, always believable as a teen douche. That is what I wrote before knowing any of this.
Then also like so the setup of this movie is a journalist in her 20s is sent on an undercover mission to a high school to pretend she's still 17 and kind of write some story about the things teenagers do nowadays. And so you have basically the world of the high school, which is all these actors who are also in their 20s playing teenagers. So that makes Drew Barrymore immediately less detectable. And then you have basically her office and her colleagues and her. So that's where you have some older actors, and you have John C. Reilly and Molly Shannon as her like John C. Reilly is sort of her direct boss, and Molly Shannon is her colleague.
Octavia Spencer is there.
Octavia Spencer is her other colleague. This is like the Oscar, the Academy Award nominated. I mean, Molly Shannon isn't, but Molly Shannon is good enough to should have been nominated for more things.
I just love Molly Shannon in everything because she just like has this way to command the room.
Yeah.
And she does here too, even though it's not a very thankful role.
I mean, she does this for a while. She's sometimes the wacky best friend in rom-coms for a little bit around that time. She is in Serendipity.
She's like a different version of Catherine Hahn. Catherine Hahn is the likable best friend. She's like the wacky best friend. Yeah. Martha Hackett is in this, which really threw me. Who I only know as like really, really Star Trek Voyager's greatest villain. I'm going to say it right here.
Kathke.
Yeah, so good. And as a teacher,
as a wacky Spanish teacher is, this is so funny because I watched this around the same time when I grew up watching Voyager, and at some point I realized that's her, and I was like, oh my god, it's Kathke.
So much older and like kind of proper and like not conniving, and it was like, oh, she must really be a good actress because I just like bought her as this evil.
Yeah, I know. But also I saw her, I think I saw her at a convention once, and as most actors are, she happens to just be an actor with a normal life. I mean, she was also pregnant during the filming of Voyager, so I think there's probably a moment where, I mean, she might not have gotten more parts. I mean, we know what the industry is like, but this is probably her maybe even coming out of maternal leave and then trying to get parts, and then it's I don't know. It's one of those, again, like so many people in this. Lily Sobieski is the nerdy,
which again is a very Hollywood casting of a nerdy best friend, but but because she can play it, like it's still the thing that always gets me about these teen movies, and I know how these things work. It's not like I was born yesterday. Like everyone in these movies is incredibly good looking, and the amount of like every time that somebody gets accosted, every time that somebody gets, it's told, oh, you just like this dumpy little thing, and I'm like, just like none of that ever works. All of these people are like right out of a J. Crew catalog.
Yeah, and Lily Sobieski, so I mean, spoiler, so at the end of the credits they have a cute thing where they put everyone's actual high school photos in the credits, and she's clearly the prettiest of them all. Like she's
the only one with the good high school photo.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, she probably was already acting then. It wasn't that long ago for her by that point, right?
Not even
model probably. So, but it's funny. And then the love interest, who is the English teacher, is Michael Vartan. And it's funny because a few years later, he was sort of the love interest and lead on Alias. And if you look back on Alias, wondering which of the men there would become a big Hollywood leading man, he was clearly the guy that everyone sort of thought was going to be that. And then it turned out to be Bradley Cooper, who played the hapless best friend.
Yeah. Who was good as the hapless best friend, and like I'm still like completely out of like Alias. I'm still annoyed, sad, angry about what happened to her best friend. Just saying.
Yeah, and also how that ended, because it was J.J. Abrams' chart, where it starts with really, really strong, and then 5 seasons in, it's just a complete fucking mess like Lost was. Yeah. But all the actors in that were great. I think that show kept itself alive based on the fact that I think a lot of the actors were really close friends and just had too much fun making it.
They're just all good. They're just all
like
good for no reason.
Jennifer Garner and Victor Garber are still best friends, which is like because of the age difference, but you see them around a lot.
Like officiated her wedding or something. Like they're really
something
close.
Like that. They're really, really close. And then I don't know if they're close with Ron Rifkin, but I happen to know that Ron Rifkin, who's like the villain on Alias, is like the goofiest man alive. And if you watch the blooper reels for Alias, like if you've never watched Alias, I don't know if that's also funny, but like just watch the blooper reels of Alias. I think at this point you can watch the first season of that and the blooper reels, and it sets you up. That's everything you need to see.
What is it? It's like Neil Donahue, who is like a really really good villain, and he's like one of those goofy guys. Like sometimes like the people who are the goofiest can play the best villains.
Yeah,
because
there's Jason Isaacs.
There's a certain unpredictability, I think, that comes with that. I think that's why. So Michael Vartan, who feels like he's kind of the proto Glee teacher here a little bit. Like there's a little bit of that. Like has trouble with his relationship. With this girlfriend who is like in one scene and like this is the thing. Okay, there's 2 things I'm just gonna before we like move any further, and like this is the thing that I have to say. There's 2 things I really don't like about this movie. One is the casual way that they treat all this like age gap, underage like creepiness, that really, really creeped me out, especially the David Arquette coming in there as a 23-year-old, ostensibly dating a 16-year-old, and like then she gets like one scene where she half tells him off, and he doesn't really even have a redemption arc on that. That really bugged me.
Yeah, I think that's almost worse than her and the teacher, because at least he doesn't make a move, and he's clearly questioning himself, and then it feels very betrayed when it's revealed that she is much older. And I mean, he questions her from the get. Great
romantic relationship, but it's not as problematic.
The first thing he asks her is like, "Are you actually 17?" Yeah. Like, so there's clearly that. But I mean, we all know too many cases of statutory rape between teachers and like 17-year-olds that it's not funny anymore. And it's often actually women. Like, it's often female teachers who get with like 17-year-old
there's
boys.
A whole gendered thing to explore there about like power dynamics and like like a man and all that.
And because often then the women obviously even less persecuted for it, which is But anyway,
the other thing which is not as important from like a maybe moralistic point of view, this movie tries to do too much. This is the thing that really bugged me about it. It is the undercover story of her going to the high school. It is the high school like love interest thing. It is her fitting in, like the whole like moving through the cliques. It's all the different people at the high school who have their things. It's the people at the office. It kind of crams it all in, and I guess that's the credit to the director being an editor. All of these stories kind of like end up somewhere and they go somewhere, but I just kept going like, wait. And yet another storyline open. It feels like this movie is like what I do when I start researching things. Like I open way too many tabs, and then you kind of like go like, okay, I don't need this one anymore. I'm going to close. And then you kind of need to come down from it. And it just was not fun to watch at times when I wanted them to concentrate more on her story.
Yeah. And I mean, it's clearly, it's trying to also make the obvious point. So I think the problem is that you have the storyline of you have a love story, you have the rom-com love story of like, will they or won't they? What are they going to do? We always know she's old enough, but like, what is this weird situation there and how is this going to get resolved? And then the other thing is her arc of like, she obviously was always the nerd. She has like this essentially trauma of being severely bullied in high school, and then now has to go back to high school and thinks she will get a second shot, and then immediately is the loser again, but then that flips it around when her brother comes in to help her out and become the popular girl. So she's experienced both things, and by the end can basically tell them, look, it's only high school. None of this actually matters. All of this, you're all people with your own strengths and weaknesses, and once you leave high school, none of these hierarchies will matter all that much, like not in the way you think. And I mean, that's the obvious thing you can do with a teen movie, but then like, it's essentially trying to be the rom-com and the teen movie at the same time. And
I think that's the crux of it. The other thing, I mean, she actually does mention it, right? Like it's in the script when she says, when the PE teacher comes in, like, if you fail PE, you'll never get like a good job, or you never like, and she's like, you're still telling people that lie. Like the fact that she knows. I like that. I wanted kind of more of that, of her actually like being an active participant and kind of being able to
I think
those tropes more, because she kind of just plays into them for most of the movie.
Yeah, I feel like that movie would have worked without even it becoming a rom-com. If you had made a movie about that experience of going back to high school and being undercover. What I think is interesting about it is though, because obviously like so at some point she's wearing a camera at all times, and then her colleagues start following it along, and it's the kind of fun reality TV thing almost, where everyone starts watching it and is kind of like actually, shipping this and wants this to happen. And I mean, that sort of made sense for me and adds kind of this perspective. And I don't know. Oh, one famous person we forgot to talk about so far is Gary Marshall. Who is the head of the newspaper, sort of like old newspaper owner, who comes up with this concept, because he was like, I didn't know my son had a peanut allergy. Like, what do we even know about our kids anymore?
Yeah.
So I need an undercover piece about sending someone to high school, and then points at her and sends her. Like,
which to me, this is the flimsiest of concepts. And to me also, like, at some point I wrote, why is she even there? She's not even investigating anything specific. And that also puts her in the position of constantly having to pitch stories which nobody likes, because there's really slim pickings there. Like, it's, shocker, kids are still kids, right? That's what she's going to find out about this, even if they now have peanut allergy.
To be fair, it makes sense to me as a concept, even though
I know
that we quite often the most idiotic person in the room is the CEO, and everyone has to tell, because I mean her direct boss, John C. Reilly, she keeps trying to get bigger jobs essentially, but she's only an assistant, she's only in her early 20s, and he basically keeps telling her, not like a hard-hitting journalist, right? You can write maybe, but you don't have what it takes essentially. And it makes sense that someone from way up above makes this completely harebrained decision. So at least I sort of buy that.
I do buy it. That's the thing that I thought, where I was watching it and this is a thing that didn't work for me as a motivator in a movie. I buy the reality of it so much, because all of these New York Times journalists who haven't eaten at a diner in 7 years getting sent to Pennsylvania in election season to have a burger and figure out that people still hate taxes. And that's somebody's idea, right? Somebody.
And it's usually a CEO who's never spoken to a normal person in the last 30 years.
Believable. It's completely believable. It's still a stupid trope. And so my criticism is not with the movie, it's with the reality.
I mean, so the funny thing is, and need to bring this in now because the newspaper is the Chicago Sun-Times. And so we have another rom-com set in Chicago, so we're not in LA, we're not in New York, we're not, but and the funny thing, of course, is that the Chicago Sun-Times very much exists, and Roger Ebert, our good friend Roger Ebert, famously is the film critic for the Chicago Sun-Times at this moment. So reading his review was very fun, because he's obviously this is not how any of this works, but it doesn't matter.
Which I think is exactly what I expected, right? Yeah.
This is to his credit, because he always has this perspective where now too many people get hung up on these things of but this would never happen in real life. This doesn't make sense for my industry at all. And he's you know what? Whatever. It's good.
Yeah. Have you watched a doctor's show ever?
Yeah.
It's
and he actually quite liked it. He's right in saying it's funny and big-hearted, and I do give it that. It's trying to be heartfelt about things. And what he mostly highlights is the star power of Drew Barrymore. And of course, at that point in time, he's very right. Because, I mean, of course, she's a child star and she comes from this massive family. We all know that about Drew Barrymore. But by that point, it's clear she's trying to prove herself as an adult and with her own production company and as an actress in leading roles. And she clearly, cast herself in this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think he's very right about saying, she has that thing. And so she's not just a Nepo baby, essentially. She does have actual talent and, So that's Roger Ebert for you, always focusing on the important bits.
There is something also about rewatching this now when Drew Barrymore is no longer just Drew Barrymore, the former child star turned movie star, but also the talk show host who is relentlessly parodied for her way of speaking, and I cannot unthink that watching her now. Very Drew Barrymore in this, and so I'm not sure if I'm watching this in a way that actually makes me appreciate her in this less now because I know her in this role. So I was actually wondering about that. I don't know. It might be.
Yeah, I mean, my problem also is because it's always those things that sort of age badly, not just that James Franco aged badly. I mean, he doesn't have a big part, but also being an adult and seeing statutory rape for what it potentially is.
Yeah.
Though, of course, it isn't, but with her brother, who's David Arquette, by the way, coming in and doing this again, that feels more of a thing. I mean, he's not actually sleeping with this 16-year-old, which we know because that comes up, but it's still creepy enough. And the other thing is Drew Barrymore for me, because I was a huge fan of hers, probably because I watched that movie so much when I was a teenager and sort of really the perfect age for it. And also Charlie's Angels, like the remake she also produces and that she's in, that's like 2 years later. So I was a huge fan of hers, and then obviously having seen E.T. as a kid too, right? And then now with her talk show, the thing that really soured her for me was that, like, she always seemed like the good Nepo baby, but then when the strikes happened, she like broke the strike, like she fucking crossed the picket line. And she also, like, even though she clearly would have the money to just pay all her writers and not work, like, it is, you know, it's one of those, and she was very weird about this whole thing. So
yeah, my thing that kind of soured me on Drew Barrymore is her, I think it's like in the Charlie's Angel era when she did a bunch of interviews, and I just felt like she was being a bit of a girl boss, Sheryl Sandberg, lean in person too much. Like, it felt very like, you know, peak neoliberal. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Not that I, you know, actively liked her. It's just the fact that, okay, I don't, you know, there's people who you just like, every time that you see them, you're just like delighted. And when I see Drew Barrymore, I'm like, okay, maybe it's okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Charlie's Angels came out, I was still too young to actually like watch like interviews or anything like that. So it tracks for her to now be a fucking scab and not care about paying her writers, because it's exactly, I mean, that also makes sense for somebody who grew up as part of one of the biggest Hollywood dynasties, which people tend to ignore. Like people, some people are basically not informed enough to remember that there was a very, very big name in old Hollywood whose last name was Barrymore, and that is the same. Barrymore, and like that kind of, and I mean, I still think it's laudable that she, like, I mean, she was a drug addict at like 13 or 14 years old, and she kind of
speed ran Carrie Fisher basically.
Yeah, and she like pulled herself out of that, and this is the moment after when she like really is trying to she put herself back together, and she's producing this and she's doing this, and of course she has a big cushion to fall back on, but like getting out of addiction is still a hard thing to do. And as far as I know, she didn't relapse in adult age.
My whole thing with this is like, we know that people aren't perfect and they get to be not perfect. She's a perfectly fine rom-com heroine. Like, I don't have any problem with her in that role.
Yeah. And I mean, she has sort of the comedic chops for this part too. So I mean, this having the sort of similar wacky sensibility as 10 Things I Hate About You sometimes does, she gets enough to do, right? She gets to do the flashback nerd stuff. She gets to do the accidentally got high off brownies thing, like that kind of stuff.
You know what's a weird word? Fork. Who ate all my cake? Like, it's the dumbest stoner humor, but it works every time. It's there because it works. It's fun.
Yeah. And I mean, she has enough chemistry with Michael Vartan. She's believable as someone who cleans up nicely, because it's a good
that I appreciated. What I thought when I saw it, like, oh, they're doing a very smart thing, that the first time you see her in like a high school attire is not in the actual, we're dressing her down to be a 17-year-old. We start with a flashback to her in the early 90s actually being a 17-year-old. And so we're kind of implanting, this is how she actually looks at it. That was actually a smart thing that they did. And it kind of like made it easier for her to kind of connect with that. On top of the fact that I think everybody in this movie is 25 and like the teachers are 5 years older. It's a little... It's
the usual teen genre problem. That's why I said she's not easily detectable when everyone else is also 25.
It's like when you are surprised in like 20 years later how like the children from a teen show got old and the parents have aged relatively well. I'm like, yeah, they were like,
yeah, because they're 10 years older, maybe.
like, it's not that big of a deal in that sense. It's just funny because like every time that you can see, you can peek behind the curtain. That's a fun thing.
Yeah, I think
weirdly, David Arquette, who I usually find kind of endearing in these roles. I loved him in Scream. Like that's kind of like up era. I never bought him as like even a 23-year-old. Like I thought he looked too old for that. I don't know how old he was, but he looked too old for it, even if he was 23. And then like that anybody would buy that he would play a teenager. Also not quite getting that. So I liked him. This is again like the thing that I keep coming back to with this movie is like all the people in it there's so many great actors and like they feel like they're weirdly placed sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean the story arc just ages the worst, but also I mean I get the message they're trying to do with it. So he's sort of this like he was the football star but had a knee injury and basically or like baseball, sorry, and like he was the big jock and had an injury and couldn't pursue the sport as like an actual career, which happens to countless of those people. And so there's the same moral of like the people who may be cool in high school will not be later. And I mean, many films have done this, including Back to the Future. But it's like he just works in this like tiki outpost store and is kind of like loser, doesn't have his life together, and so going back to school he sort of gets to relive his glory days. But even his 16-year-old girlfriend is like, so what do you want to do, like, you know, for a job?
Be a loser.
And he's like, no, like, I mean, I want to play and whatever, or like, or just keep working at the tiki.
It feels like, there's part of the storyline that would have been important for his growth that got cut. And again, that brings me back to my problem with the movie is it tries to do too much.
Yeah, maybe an extra 10 minutes for once would have helped. And I mean, it's... So by the end, he's in so that's also, it almost seems to miss a chunk of like how does he get to be the assistant coach?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like there's scenes cut literally.
I mean, it makes sense for me. It's like, okay, well, if you can't play, you can still coach and you clearly enjoy being in this, like, and maybe even in the high school setting. You don't need to, you can just work at a high school. You can just be a high school coach. You can work with kids and train them in baseball, whatever. So I think like the movie is trying to say, and this is I think what Ebert was getting at when he said it's big harder, because it's trying to actually have sort of a moral of the story, and it's trying to have this lesson, which is not very original, but it's still like, you know, that's what a lot of people have. And obviously screenwriters tend to have been the nerds in high school and are now the people that may have way cooler jobs.
Wait, this is new. This is news to me. I never knew this.
So like we love the story as a screenwriter, obviously, but I mean it is true, because again, all the things that matter back then might not matter now. Most of the people I know from my school, even though it was an American high school with those hierarchies and it was an all-girls school, but looking at like the cooler, always pretty, always has the, you know, like has the perfect skin and the perfect hair and whatever girls, I don't know, most of them have boring office jobs, and one of them is literally doing influencer shit because her pretty face was exactly good for that, and she always had bad grades, and now she has an influencer account and a baby with some rich dude who owns clubs. Like, it's you know what I mean? And the others, again, like most of them just have unassuming careers, and I mean, I wish them all the best, and they probably have perfectly happy, fine lives. I'm just saying, like, none of these people actually turn out to be models or in some way have anything cooler going on for their lives than I do. And I think,
I think there is this, it's kind of, to me, it's the tapestry problem, like that the Star Trek TNG episode where we see like what Captain Picard's like alternative life would have been. And instead of being the captain, he's just kind of like a lowly science officer. on a fucking spaceship, and I'm like, that's actually pretty good. Like your life that is like the bad version of your life in which you didn't do the things that you did to be getter is actually a perfectly fine life, and I feel like that's
Yeah. I mean, that's also like I think these are that is sort of the kind of movie that is supposed to make you think about that, and maybe you don't, and maybe you do. But like, I mean, I always think back to the moment where I didn't go to acting school audition. I wouldn't even have known if I had gotten in or not. I just never went. And it's like, well, you know, my job now is precarious. That job also would have been precarious. It's just like, it feels like a different flavor of the same thing all along.
I had this like so Carrie is friends with some people who are opera singers here in Cologne, and she went at some point to a party where it was mostly them. And at some point they're looking over to her and like, oh, I'm sorry, we're just like talking shop here. And so like, yep, for once it's not American history, but I understand what's happening here. It's like, it's kind of the same, like no matter what kind of precarious community you land in that has usually some artsy, usually some intellectual kind of job, like a job where you don't just push numbers around. They are all very similar, strangely.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, maybe I got different, would have likely had gotten different types of depression from this one. It wouldn't have, like, you know what I mean? Like, academia never gives you complexes about your looks, but it gives you complexes about like imposter syndrome, about how smart you are, and if you're not doing enough work or the right work or your work good enough. And like acting probably would have just meant more body issues and whatever. But like, I mean, the sum total of it is maybe the system and the job market was the problem all along, and not you as an individual.
Yeah.
And I think this is also like they're trying to say this thing of like, well, you know, whatever faux hierarchy high school came up with where looks matter and whatever. I mean, sure, in the real world, looks also matter in great ways, but not in the necessarily career defining and everything defining ways that they do. You can have a very well paying job looking like like a complete average person.
Like the thing that always gets me about these high school movies, because I feel like their message is always none of this matters. This is made up. It's kind of like almost like a post-structuralist message of like all of these hierarchies are just made up and they don't matter. But in a way, the message is wrong, because the fact that you are living through, that you're navigating made up hierarchies in high school, and they're not the same hierarchies as exist in quote unquote the real world, you're still navigating made up hierarchies, which is what the world is like. So you are kind of preparing for your life in the real world. So it's not like none of this matters. The specifics don't matter, but the whole like bigger picture thing of, yeah, there's going to be people who are like that. They are like the mean girls. They are like the jocks. They are like the nerds. And you're going to have to relate to these people in some fashion. And that means also that you will have some standing in some people's eyes. And that's not going to go away. So, yeah.
It's just that intellect matters a lot more outside of high school than it does in which is obviously always the moral of the story, but it's also true because the math club kids, like someone like Lady Sobieski, who also looks like a model anyway, but like even if she's just quote unquote the brain, if she's good enough to be like a top tier like scientist in whatever field, she may not win the Nobel Prize, but she will probably get a pretty good job at some big pharma company if she's not dumb enough to go into academia and like make shit tons of money. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like
the Diane Courts will do fine.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah.
Which thinking back to that movie, like John Cusack's is like he wants to be the boyfriend of Diane. That's actually a pretty damn good career move, like considering her prospect.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Drew Barrymore's character, there's also something here where there is a certain through line that isn't about like, yes, she cleaned up, she's still sort of the ugly duckling, but like of course like her acne cleaned up and she doesn't wear braces anymore, so she would look perfectly fine. It's always the self-esteem issue, right? And this is kind of the moral of it too. she wouldn't have gotten this like break in journalism had it not been for wacky Gary Marshall pointing at her. But it's also been a matter of her standing up for herself more. Like she's kind of timidly pitching things to her boss, but she's not asserting herself at all. And I think what obviously is her big thing here is learning that all these structures that she put on herself don't make sense. And like she could be the popular girl. It's always arbitrary. She just needs to kind of learn to stand up for herself.
Which is why the David Arquette storyline is in this, right? Because he's user and there he becomes the popular guy again by coleslaw in a scene that's looked like right out of Community. Also, sorry, go ahead. I just thought of one.
Yeah, and the sort of again sort of Shakespearean aspect of like rumors, but it also says something about popularity and constructed image, right? Because the way he makes her popular is not just by proxy to him, but also because he fabricates this massive backstory for her, which is just like a lesson in like marketing, and now but like obviously stardom and influencer stuff is even more important. So I think that's also the lesson of like anyone could be the popular girl. You just need a good enough PR team. Like,
it feels like in a post The Apprentice Donald Trump, like completely unqualified for the job but still doing it world that feels so true and so. Like, it's like when like a random ad like will say something that on that particular day you really didn't need to hear. Like that's how it feels sometimes. These things like, oh no, too close for comfort to the real world. But like the lesson it's not a bad lesson still. So maybe just the Drew Barrymores, like the Josies of the world need to learn that lesson more than the David Arquettes. Who knows?
Yeah. Do we want to talk about like ratings and stuff? And guidelines? So it's 6.0 IMDb, which makes perfect sense. It has a 55% tomato meter, but a 69% like the press, which makes sense because again, Roger Ebert liked it fine. He's obviously thrilled by it being the Chicago Sun-Times.
There must have been a deal for that.
It's fine.
That's The thing that struck me about the IMDb ratings, because I looked at a bunch of them and like the people who reviewed it, the people who consistently gave it like 1 star are always the people coming in 10, 15 years later going like, well, this is problematic. I'm like, you're not wrong. Like, you're not wrong. But also, to a certain degree, it's judging the movie on something that it wasn't being judged on as harshly at the time because nobody said anything, which is still...
Also, Roger Ebert doesn't really say anything. I mean, it's also like
this is the thing. Roger Ebert does not have a problem with age gaps. Let's just put that out there. He is going to...
He's also an old white man.
Issues with that, but he does not have a problem with that.
So... Also, it's funny because this is a rom-com podcast. We didn't really talk about the rom-com aspects of it all, but I think it also almost feels tagged on. So, I mean, the rom-com storyline has certain beats. It's like, oh, they clearly have chemistry. Clearly is questioning himself about it because he's her teacher and doesn't know she's not 17. He has the wrong girlfriend trademark that wants him to move to New York and clearly is a bad fit because he's an English teacher who loves literature and she's this corporate girl from New York. It's almost Hallmark, except for they live in Chicago.
There's like another side of this movie where it's her Hallmark movie.
Yeah, and Drew Barrymore also obviously has a thing for him, but also knows she can't do this now. And then when the jig is up, she publishes publishes a piece in the paper and kind of cashes in on the reality TV aspect that we already see happening with her colleagues, where people might get invested in this and then asks him to do this public event, which is how she kind of saves her career with the newspaper, where he needs to come down to the baseball stadium and meet her and kiss her. And he does turn up just a minute too late, so there's some extra.
Which also, like, that's a random timer that she puts on. Like, it's not like that's bound to anything. It feels very much like an academic deadline. Just saying.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of that. And then of course they get together in the end, and now nobody needs to like worry about the age gap because it doesn't actually exist. So yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're gonna say when people ask how they met. I like it's 1999. If I were them, I'd just go online or something, but or in college, or I don't know.
I'm like,
But anyway.
so she was an investigative reporter posing as a
17-year-old, and I was her English teacher.
Yeah, okay. How old is he?
I mean,
How old is he? He must be like he's not that old.
No, that's also the thing. Yeah. I think he's probably maybe 30 tops. I think he's younger. He's probably late 20s. I mean, no matter how old Michael Vartan is, I would buy him as like a 28-year-old or something, and she's 25 in real life, so that wouldn't make. I mean, it's like it's more the quote unquote age gap that doesn't exist for like a lot of in university settings. You know, when I thought university is 27, and a lot of my students were my same age. Not saying I ever would have dated them. But like, you know, it's sometimes the weirdness of like one of us is a teacher and the other isn't, but we're like 2 years apart. That is more that. But like,
they're actually older than you. Like I had
I've also
teaching. I think in like tutorial classes in my third semester, and there were all these like senior citizens.
Yeah. I mean, the seniors still have those now. I mean, now I'm 35, and it's rarer that I have students that are actually older or the same age, but a lot of them might still be close. People who take longer or studied later might still be. So, yeah. And like in reality, that age gap doesn't matter. It's just a circumstance that he thinks he's 17, but again,
which I think is a discussion that is also worth having, right? It's age gaps are generally more problematic when there's a power differential. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Like,
and one person is underage. That is the thing that always matters greatly, and in that case, that makes it statutory, right? If I don't mind age gaps, if both people are adults, the age gap discussion, we've had this before, has gone way out of proportion with Gen Z, who heard all of the stuff about grooming and whatever. But I'm like, the thing is, if you're a woman in her early 20s dating some dude in her 60s, you're an adult making a dumb decision, but you're an adult. If that 60-year-old guy happens to be your boss, then it's a different thing again, because then it's like Lewinsky Clinton of like, there's a massive power differential where she's clearly still being exploited.
I think this is a really good example, because like the problem with Lewinsky Clinton was never the age gap. It was with the power differential.
And that's the thing. And like, and if I don't know, and I mean, in dating life also, because I mean, there's certain truths to genders maturing differently, because men are often not pushed to actually mature emotionally. So it's quite common for people who have like a 10 to 20 year age gap, where often the man is older, simply because of these life circumstances. And like, I never think that is inherently a problem. That is people's choice, as long, again, both people are adults and there's not like a thing.
I will say there is like early 20s to like 60-year-olds, I would find a much more problematic proposition than, you know, like 30s to like a 70 something, or like there is there is life experience.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But it's like, there's a difference between like, how informed is the decision you're making in your early 20s? Is it dumb, or is it actually like, you know, like actual exploitation? Has your frontal lobe developed or not?
In today's episode of Sabrina and Torsten get themselves canceled by Gen Z. Basically,
I don't like
the frontal lobe thing. Always gets me as well, because like that's presented as like settled science when it's just also like not that easy, and people are
it's more life experience. Where are you, like your life, what experience have you made? And that can also vary wildly between people. It depends on when you started to work, what your home life was like. All of this can also kind of mature you in ways that, you know, if you've been super sheltered, has not. So I don't know. I don't judge people. If I'm 35 and I would meet someone who's 50, And for some reason that would work out. Also, there's a lot of lesbian relationships with age gap. I mean, people make a huge deal out of, like, my favorite example is like Holland Taylor and Sarah Paulson, who I think are 20 plus years apart.
Yeah, but Sarah Paulson is like in her 40s, right?
Yeah, and Holland Taylor is almost 80. But exactly, so that why is that a problem for people? It's just people being ageist towards Holland Taylor. It's like, why you're sleeping with someone who's that old? And it's like, look at her, it's Holland Taylor, like, whatever. But like, people construe that to be some problematic age gap, but it's really just people not wanting old women to have sex. Like, that's just, you know, like, so again, the age gap discourse is sometimes also masking other things, I think.
Yeah, I mean the kind of like heterosexual equivalent would be like Dick Van Dyke, who also, like, his wife is, I think, literally half his age, but like in her 50s, right? Because he's just old.
Then, I mean, again, like, are you really gonna say a 50-plus-year-old was not mature enough to do? But what are you arguing here? Actually, if anything, someone almost being 100, you could argue she's exploiting him, which obviously also is sometimes an argument that's being made. But like, just let people live sometimes. Like, seriously.
It's this interesting discussion, which for me is mostly academic, because like my most significant, really only significant relationship is like with someone who is within a month of my age. Like, I have no actual.
Yeah, all people I've dated were exactly my age, like a year, but that's not true. I dated one person who was much older, but the problem definitely was not the age gap. So, you know.
Anyway, this is our cultural commentary podcast. Let's get back.
But anyway, that's taglines. So the movie actually has 4 official taglines.
Wow.
The class clown just turned chic, which is weird because she was never the class clown.
No.
A comedy with class, which is just a bad pun. She's never been hip, never been cool, never been in until now. And of course that's, the title of the movie's Never Been Kissed, but yeah. And Some Things Are Worth Waiting For, which is the more obvious, boring rom-com storyline. It's like, what, you're waiting for her to turn 18? Big shit. Anyway, it's weird.
Yeah, it's not, again, like, this is a thing that I just did not appreciate about the movie. You do you. Like, if people want to watch this and you know, put that out of their mind, fine.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, I watched this a lot when I was a teenager and didn't reflect on this, the whole age gap discourse, the statutory rape discourse. And for that, I will always have some nostalgic feelings for it. I do think there's great people in it delivering great performances. Yeah, I mean, it's 90 minutes long. You're like, if you can get over that setup, it's still perfectly fine. But yeah.
I guess my fake tagline is kind of like playing into that whole thing. It's undercover as underage.
Oh God.
Which is everything for a stupid pun.
I don't know. I think I just want to go with like Gary Marshall's character going like, "What do you even know about our teenagers anymore?" Yeah, and I don't know.
I think this is a movie that is appreciated by people mostly in clip form, which I think is also fair. Like,
yeah. Well, anyway, I think that exhausts what I have to say about that.
That's that much for Never Been Kissed. Except, let me say, it's lying about its premise of her never having been kissed, because she defines it as never having been really kissed, which feels like a cop out. Like, that feel like when she says that within like the first like 10 minutes of the movie, and I'm like, so, because like the movie where it's somebody who like really has had no relationships would have actually been a more interesting movie to me. But that
it feels like she probably didn't actually ever have a proper relationship, just because she might have kissed somebody in college or something.
But it's still, you know.
Yeah.
You can run to the extremes. This movie runs to the extremes in so many other ways. Why not this one? Which is the title of the movie.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the new tagline is "She's actually been kissed, but."
Yeah. Never been kissed, parentheses, in the correct way.
Never been kissed by her teacher, thank God. Anyway.
That's an ABBA song, man.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. That's it.